the space age didn't begin with science. No. It began when a founder of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory summoned a demon. That single act is the ignition point for the entire unexplained aerial phenomenon. What you and I are witnessing, from the first sightings in 1947 to the carefully managed disclosure of the present, is not an extraterrestrial visitation. It reads as a deception of spiritual origin, an anomaly meticulously cultivated for almost a century. To grasp the scale of this operation, we return to where it began. Not in a hangar, not in a laboratory, but in a ritual in the Mojave Desert. The year is 1946, the location, California's Mojave Desert. The man at the center of this event is Jack Parsons. This is not a fringe lunatic in a shack with candles. By day, he is one of the principal founders of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, a brilliant, respected rocket scientist whose work is foundational to the American space program. His mind lives in equations, conceiving chemical propellants and orbital mechanics. But at night, that same intellect is applied to a different kind of physics, an older kind. Parsons is a devout occultist, a follower of the infamous Aleister Crowley. And here, under the desert stars, he is not building a rocket to reach the heavens. He is attempting to bring one of its entities down to Earth. This is the rite known as the Babalon Working. The objective is unambiguous: perform a sequence of high magic powerful enough to tear a hole in the fabric of reality itself, to create a gateway. Picture the scene. Parsons stands within a circle drawn in the sand, dressed in black robes, a magnetized sword in his hand. He is not alone. He has an assistant, a scribe to record the proceedings. For nights on end, he chants in Enochian, a complex, guttural language said to be the tongue of angels, delivered to mankind centuries ago. The sound is alien, a vibration that does not belong in the quiet of the desert, an acoustic anomaly. He is following a precise formula, a kind of spiritual technology, aimed at a singular outcome. The air grows heavy. The ritual intensifies over 11 consecutive days. Then, on the final night, during the climactic invocation, it happens. The wind, which had been blowing steadily across the plains, suddenly stops. A sharp, unnatural drop in temperature is felt by everyone present. And then comes the sound. His scribe would later report it as a distinct, audible rip, a tearing sound in the sky, he said, like a great zipper being opened. On any instrument, a submersible's hydrophone, a flight recorder, it would register simply as an unexplained anomaly. At that moment, Jack Parsons, the rocket scientist, believed he had succeeded. A gateway was now open. The question is, what, if anything, came through? An open gateway never stays empty for long. Less than 18 months after Jack Parsons concluded his work in the desert, the consequences began to manifest. Not in occult circles or hidden grimoires, but in the open air above America. On June 24, 1947, a private pilot named Kenneth Arnold was flying near Mount Rainier in Washington. He watched 9 crescent-shaped objects moving in formation, slicing across the sky at a velocity he calculated at over 1,200 miles per hour, a speed no known aircraft of that era could reach. Their motion, he reported, was wrong, unnatural, like a saucer skipping across water. The press seized on that image and coined a new term for what he saw: flying saucers. In that moment, the modern UFO age began. This was the first wave, the beachhead. And just a few weeks later, in July, came the wreckage. In the high desert plains near Roswell, New Mexico, something fell from the sky. A local rancher came across a debris field stretching for nearly a mile. The material itself was an anomaly. Witnesses who handled it described a thin metallic foil, so light it was nearly weightless. yet it could not be cut, dented, or burned. One officer from the Roswell Army airfield would later remember holding a fragment in his hands, saying the so-called memory metal felt almost like water. You could crush it into a ball, then watch it slowly unfold itself, smooth again, leaving no creases at all. And there was more. According to first-hand accounts, the military recovered not just debris, but occupants, small, frail forms with large, hairless heads and dark, oversized eyes. For a brief window of time, the official story actually matched the reality on the ground. The Roswell Army airfield issued a press release stating they had recovered a flying disc. Then the directive arrived from a higher authority. Within hours, the narrative was forcibly rewritten. The commanding officer was ordered to stand before cameras, holding the torn remains of a common weather balloon, and to declare that this was the object that had been found. A flying disc became a weather balloon. An event of unprecedented significance was buried under a clumsy, almost insulting fiction. What matters is not just the events themselves, but their timing. The sudden eruption of anomalous phenomena did not follow the invention of the atomic bomb. It did not follow the advent of radar. It followed the ritual in the desert. The public was told a lie. That much is obvious. The conventional wisdom says the United States military covered up the existence of an extraterrestrial craft. And in a narrow sense, that explanation is accurate. But it is also dangerously incomplete. It assumes the objective was simply to hide a technology. But what if the real goal was to hide a theology? The deepest deception at Roswell wasn't the lie about the weather balloon. The real deception was the quiet assumption that these things came from the stars in the first place. That question, the idea that the source was not extraterrestrial at all, began to carve a deep fracture through the Pentagon itself. While the public was being fed stories of weather balloons, an insulated cluster of intelligence analysts were staring at one thing: the timeline. They noticed that the wave of anomalies did not begin after the invention of the atomic bomb, or after the development of radar. It began, with unnerving precision, in the months immediately following Jack Parsons' ritual in the desert. Then, in June of 1952, Parsons was killed in a mysterious explosion inside his home laboratory. The official cause of death was ruled an accident. But less than 30 days later, the skies over Washington, D.C. erupted. A massive flotilla of unidentified objects appeared over the nation's capital, brazenly maneuvering above the White House and the Capitol building for hours. A pattern people dismiss as coincidence. The connection was, for some, impossible to ignore. The sorcerer was dead, and something he had summoned was making its presence known. This created a new kind of operational problem. How do you establish contact with a non-terrestrial intelligence that does not appear to utilize radio frequencies or any recognizable form of technology? How do you talk to something that behaves less like a spacecraft and more like an unexplained presence beyond the reach of instruments? The Pentagon's answer would terrify a small group of its own officers. Pause here. The solution they devised was so profoundly unscientific, so deeply steeped in the occult, that the records were sealed for more than 50 years. This was the moment the objective shifted, from searching for little green men to communicating with spirits. In 1954, the United States government made contact, not with a massive radio dish, but through a civilian housewife from Maine named Frances Swan. Using the occult method of automatic writing, her hand began to channel information, technical data, directly from the entities. For the secret faction within the Pentagon, this was the final, horrifying piece of evidence. If the beings communicated through a psychic medium, they were not biological organisms from another star system. Their true nature was far older and far more malevolent. They concluded they were dealing with demons. This group, later known as the Collins Elite, presented their findings. They issued a stark warning that this was a spiritual deception, an ancient ruse dressed up as a modern anomaly. But it was already too late. The military-industrial complex was seduced. The entities were offering a Faustian bargain: miraculous technologies, advanced propulsion systems, and material science that would guarantee global supremacy. The spiritual warning never stood a chance against that promise. The warning was dismissed in favor of the technological prize. The deal was struck. The advanced technology began to flow into black projects, sinking like a submersible to the ocean floor. But a Faustian bargain always has a price, one not paid in dollars, but in flesh and insanity. And the men who made direct contact would soon discover the terrifying, personal cost of the secrets they had been given. For decades, the true cost of that Faustian bargain stayed buried, sealed off not just by governments, but by the sheer terror of the people who paid it. A debt logged not in dollars, but in flesh and insanity. But in 1991, a crack opened. The real nature of that debt finally surfaced. The testimony didn't come from a declassified file or some grainy piece of film. It came from the trembling voices of two men who could no longer carry the weight of what they'd experienced. They were scientists, rationalists, men of logic and data, working deep inside the Defense Intelligence Agency, the DIA. And when their reality fractured, they didn't head to a debriefing room. They went looking for a priest named Ray Bochi. They met him in secret. These were not the confident analysts of the intelligence world. They were shattered. They spoke in hushed, broken sentences, their hands shaking so badly they could barely hold their coffee cups. Their eyes kept sliding to the door, tracking every sound in the hallway, a kind of terror no battlefield could produce. They confessed that after working on the recovered non-human craft, after interfacing with the entities associated with it, their lives had turned into horror stories. The logical world they thought they'd mastered had been invaded by something ancient and malevolent. It started subtly, unexplained whispers in an empty house, the cold, unshakable sense of being watched. Then it escalated. One of the men, his voice cracking, described coming home to find every photograph of his family turned to face the wall. Every single frame reversed. The other spoke of poltergeist activity, books flying from shelves, objects sliding across the room with a kind of focused, palpable rage. But the real breaking point, the event that annihilated their scientific worldview, was something they both shared, even though neither had ever spoken of it to the other. That was the reason they were there, in that room with a priest. It was the shadows. Tall, featureless, human-shaped shadows appearing in the dead of night, standing silently at the foot of their beds, just watching. These men, who had analyzed extraterrestrial materials, who held the highest security clearances, were reduced to the primal fear of a child in the dark. They looked at the priest, their skepticism not just challenged, but utterly dismantled. And with a voice stripped of all hope, one of them finally gave a name to the terror that had consumed them. "We are not dealing with extraterrestrials," he said. "We are dealing with fallen angels." This was the reality of contact, a hidden spiritual war fought in the minds and homes of those who got too close. But after decades of this covert horror, the strategy shifted. The overt hostility began to fade. The tic-tacs appeared in the skies. The government started releasing official videos, and whistleblowers stepped forward with calm, measured voices. The phenomenon became almost friendly. And so we're left with a deeply unsettling question. What is more dangerous? An enemy that terrorizes you in the dark, or one that knocks on your front door, smiling, and offers you a gift? The answer is the one that offers a gift. Because the terror experienced by those DIA scientists, that wasn't an isolated incident. It was a signal, a warning that rippled through certain factions inside the Pentagon, and they took it very seriously. They studied it. They documented it. And now, they're using it as a component in their final act. By 2007, the strategy of absolute secrecy had become untenable. The anomaly was leaking through the cracks. So the strategy shifted from cover-up to conditioning. The Pentagon quietly launched a new program, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, or AATIP. On paper, its mission was to study unidentified aerial phenomena. Clean, sanitized. But the real focus was on places like Skinwalker Ranch in Utah, a site not of conventional extraterrestrial activity, but of extreme, persistent, high strangeness. A controlled environment, a laboratory. There, they began to scientifically document a phenomenon they named the Hitchhiker effect. Investigators, scientists, even decorated military personnel would leave the ranch's perimeter believing the experiment was over, only to discover the anomaly had followed them home. They recorded orbs of light drifting through the solid walls of their suburban houses. Unexplained poltergeist activity. Doors slamming, objects moving, electronics failing without cause. A distinct, oppressive presence that attached itself to people like a parasite. It was evidence of a spiritual contagion, evidence that these entities were not physical beings constrained by distance or time. They were something else entirely. Something that could infect you. Once they realized they couldn't contain it, they chose something more efficient than containment. Narrative control. The era of so-called soft disclosure began. Suddenly, after decades of denial, the Pentagon itself started releasing footage. The tic-tac, the gimbal, the go-fast. Sterile names for deeply unsettling encounters. Then came the whistleblowers, carefully sanctioned to speak. Highly credible intelligence officers like David Grush, testifying before Congress about a recovery program for craft of non-human origin, and what he carefully referred to as biologics. Each leak, each testimony, each Hollywood film quietly greenlit with Pentagon cooperation is another step in a global psychological operation. Honestly, it's a slow drip protocol. The objective is simple. Acclimatize the human population. Introduce the idea of non-human intelligence gently, almost casually, until the shock wears off. Make us comfortable with it. Prepare us to welcome them when they finally step onto the world stage. They are preparing us to accept their gifts, their technology, their philosophy, their new reality. But this final act, the Great Disclosure, is not designed as an act of salvation. The underlying truth is far more transactional and far more horrifying. They are not here to save us. So the question you must now ask yourself is, what are they here to harvest? The harvest is not of the body. It is, and always has been, a harvest of belief. The final stage of this 80-year operation, what the few who've glimpsed its architecture whisper about as the Great Deception, isn't an invasion. It's a transaction. Imagine the scenario they've been quietly preparing us for. You might think this sounds like science fiction. A day dawns, and the phenomenon, once a fleeting anomaly in our skies, a glitch on instruments, a blurred frame in classified footage, finally solidifies. They reveal themselves, globally, simultaneously, not as monstrous invaders, but as radiant figures of light. The Shining Ones. They will claim to be our creators, the architects of our DNA, returning at last to guide their flawed, brilliant experiment into maturity. And they will come bearing gifts that make our greatest achievements look primitive. The immediate, total eradication of all disease. limitless, clean energy that renders our planetary conflicts obsolete. A forced, permanent cessation of all warfare, imposed by a technology so advanced it looks like magic. Let's be honest. On the surface, it's an irresistible offer. A perfect world, delivered. But this utopia has a price. The calculus is simple, yet absolute. For this salvation, humanity must abdicate its entire spiritual history. Every religion, every faith, every tradition that has guided us through the darkness for millennia must be relinquished. Castus, archived as primitive superstition. They will ask us to unite, to become one people under one new, singular truth. Their truth. In that moment of global, grateful acceptance, the transaction is complete. A planet unified in worship, not of a transcendent God, but of the architects of its own magnificent deception. The harvest is not our bodies, it is our consent, our souls. The evidence, fragmented reports, recurring anomalies, has been pointing to this conclusion for decades. I'll state it again, plainly. They're not here to save us. They're here to harvest us. This is the endgame, an offer of paradise that costs us everything that makes us human. So when that day comes, when the sky fills with false saviors and their impossible miracles, a new question will arise. A final question. In the face of a perfect lie, what remains of the truth? You ask, when the lie is perfect, what, if anything, is left of the truth? The answer, if we're honest, isn't buried in mountains of classified documents or locked inside complex scientific analysis. It's exposed by a single, simple test. This 80-year journey, what began with an occult ritual in a desolate desert, is now reaching its final act on a global stage. We've followed the evidence, decade after decade, through reports, anomalies, and buried files, and it leads to one inescapable conclusion. The unexplained phenomenon we've called UFOs was never a prelude to a technological exchange. It has always been a battle for the human soul. These entities, when they arrive, will offer you wonders. They may promise an end to disease, to war, to suffering. They may appear as luminous saviors, as benevolent creators returning to their creation. But there is a firewall against this deception. A simple, ancient test. Beings from another planet do not flee at the name of Jesus Christ. Demons do. This is the final lens through which all coming events must be viewed. A simple, profound truth for an age of absolute deception. When the day comes, the choice will be yours to make. If you believe this warning must be heard, share this transmission. You know who needs to see it. The conversation is now more critical than ever. And subscribe, so you are not left to face what is coming in the dark.